The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Insights. I'll be your host, Teresa Lepowski. For the past few weeks, we've been investigating the Line 5 pipeline, and we thought it would be best to talk with Enbridge, the company that owns the pipeline currently. We also talked to the Kalamazoo County Health Officer at the time of the spill in the Kalamazoo River. Let's take a look.
We're constantly doing inspections of different types along Line 5. You know, we have external inspections where we send down robotic vehicles with cameras on them to look at the exterior of the pipe. We have small tools we send through the inside of the pipes that are kind of like small MRI machines, and those look for cracks or dents or any possible corrosion, things like that. But so far, all of those tests and the data that's come back to us from those tests, they've all shown that Line 5 is in very good condition. Every 2 years, we do go down and do those external inspections where we look at the outside of the pipe, look at the coating, make sure that's all looking good. So we did one of those last summer. And this summer, we have several large safety projects lined up. We're going to be doing a hydro test of the line. We're going to be doing a study of the coating of Line 5. We're also going to be installing some additional anchor supports. So we're going to be doing a lot of those types of things. Those projects are really going to be our focus. And we want to show beyond any doubt that Line 5 is operated safely and is in good condition. The currents on the lake bed there are strong, and things shift around. There can be erosion and changes to the lake bed. So when we do go in with our external inspections, you know, that's something we also look at, any changes in the lake bed, and where we see a gap that's opened up or something like that, then we go in and put in a new anchor support.
It took them hours and hours and hours to really address our rupture, and quite frankly, even after they were made aware of the fact that there was an issue, they kept pushing oil through. So, you know, the fiasco that played out with our incident doesn't really instill a whole lot of confidence that that errors wouldn't be made with Line 5 if there was a rupture. There's just no history that I can point to say I have full confidence that in the event of a rupture, Enbridge would be on it right away, and they would contain any or mitigate any significant spillage or leakage of petroleum. I think we have to have a real discussion about the regulatory oversight. I think if you've got a pipeline that's stressed, that's not designed for the volume of oil that's flowing through it, then you have to really draw a line. And it can't be, you know, it can't be self-regulating. I think the government has to do their job at all levels, but you know, the oversight of the pipeline from a regulatory standpoint has to be done. And people need to do their jobs, and we have to be honest about the condition of these pipelines, and This is the antiquated infrastructure, and a pipeline that was built in the 50s. I would question the safety of that pipeline today.
Welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Tim, who is a chemical engineer. He's going to educate us a little bit about the Line 5 pipeline. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Tim.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's always interesting to have a TV crew in my home.
Yes, that's a new experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, set the stage for us. The Line 5 pipeline is something that we've heard a lot about in recent times. Worries that perhaps it's not built to be sustained this long. Take us back in a history lesson to the building of this by Bechtel and sort of how it came to be.
And that's a great introduction to this, because I really, that's one of the things that's made me very interested in volunteering all the time I have on this project. Is it's really been a history detective thing as much as an engineering project. Been a lot of engineering, but a lot of it has just been trying to figure it out and how they did it. The basic question of how in the world did they do that really intrigued me right from the beginning. And I can't say that I have all the answers, but way back when, as demonstrated by documentation from the original agreements, the Lakehead Pipeline Company that built this thing had to get a permit from the Michigan Conservation Commission in order to construct it. And so it was originally intended to carry oil from Alberta to Sarnia, and to do that with a very small capacity by today's standards. It was designed originally to carry 120,000 barrels a day.
How much does it carry now?
540 is the nameplate capacity. So obviously there have been a few upgrades along the ways, and that's one of the concerns.
How do those upgrades, or how does it go from being built to carry this amount to all of a sudden carrying 550?
Well, the main thing is, if you want to put more fluid through a pipe, you have to have more pumping stations. You can't just jack the pressure up forever, the pipe will blow. So typically on a U.S. oil line, about every 30 miles, they put in a new pumping station that boosts the pressure back up. And so what they did, it was originally designed to have 4 pumping stations, and now it has 12. At one point, according to my research, it had 19. But there was some new technology that came in that allowed them to cut the number of pumping stations back. So primarily they just added more pumps to the whole thing.
Gotcha. What is a pumping station?
Oh, you looked at one in Mackinac City there today. It's a big building with a bunch of valves and pumps, and these are big pumps. These typical pump station for this line would probably have 4 pumps, each pump of about 2,000 horsepower. These are pretty big things. And obviously they have the capability of hurting the line if they're misoperated.
So I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand, wrap my mind around it. Do they slow down the pressure, or do they somehow enforce the pipeline?
What happens is, you put the oil into the pipeline at one end and you pressure it up to a pressure of, say, 700 psi, which would be typical of a pump station on this line. As it flows down the line, friction causes the pressure to fall. It's just like your car. You got to keep putting power if you're going to keep going. Okay. Well, so after about 40 miles, the pressure has fallen to a low enough pressure where the oil doesn't want to flow again, so then you insert another one of these big pump stations in the line.
Okay, that makes more sense. What about what the pipelines are made out of?
Oh, that pipelines like this are very typically made out of just very basic grade of steel. The pipeline under the Straits is made out of about the same steel that the coat hangers in your closet are made out of. Oh. And the rest of it is just slightly stronger steel. But it's very, very basic carbon steel. And the reason for that is typically the less alloying steel has, the more corrosion resistant it is, and they wanted this steel to be corrosion resistant, but it's still steel and it still rusts.
Is there anything that goes on top of this steel to make it more anti-corrosion?
Oh, absolutely. There are 2 systems, really. There are, first of all, there are the coatings. And just like your car, just like anything else, if you want steel to live in the environment, you've got to put paint on it. And this paint, this pipeline has a coating that depends on where you are, but under the straits, it's a coating of asphalt emulsion and then asphalt on top of that. This is very, very similar material to the roofing tar that hot mop roofers use to put roofs on commercial buildings. It's not an exotic material at all, it's cheap. And so it's got a layer of roofing tar that's mopped on the pipe hot and a couple layers of fiberglass cloth under the straits. And what's happening under the straits is clearly you can see the fiberglass cloth is coming out off the pipe. You can't really tell how much of the bare metal is exposed.
To my understanding, the Kalamazoo River flooding had the same thing happen to it, where the anti-corrosion layer was starting to peel off, and that's what resulted in that pipeline failure.
That's exactly correct. However, one interesting thing about that is the Kalamazoo pipeline, Enbridge Line 6B, it was a much newer pipeline. It was, I don't know, 10, 15 years newer, and they changed coating technology in that time. They went from the hot mop asphalt or coal tar, it could be coal tar in some places, to essentially wrapping the pipe with polyethylene tape, like electrical tape. And here's an instance where newer technology didn't work as well as the older technology. So that's why that pipeline failed, is this polyethylene wrap just didn't keep the water out. And it was a very bad technology, and there's a lot of pipes still in the ground that had that technology.
Another concern is the infrastructure of the pipeline, making sure that it has the support underneath it that it needs to not break or bend or have any kind of malfunctions like that. What do you think about Line 5's infrastructure?
Well, of course, where the pipe, the 600 and some miles of 30-inch pipe that are buried, that has perfect support under it. That's, it's laying in the dirt. And that's what was intended for the Straits pipeline, but was never accomplished. And so right from the beginning, there were several gaps under the pipeline where when they put the pipe down, the bed that they put it on wasn't flat enough. But since that time, the very strong currents in the straits that come from storms have washed a lot of soil out from under the pipeline. And so there are two figures to remember. In the easement for the straits crossing, the pipeline was limited to no unsupported span greater than 75 feet. And that requirement has been broken very many times. There also, in the engineering documents that I've researched, there was a statement that at 140-foot unsupported span, this structure wasn't stable. And there have been a number of times when spans as big as that have been allowed to develop and where perhaps the pipe has been bent. So there's some real concerns about the lack of support, and that's still going on. Enbridge has got to put a bunch more supports in this summer.
You said that. You mentioned to me before this that there were originally 4 supports that Enbridge requested to put in to reinforce the pipeline's infrastructure. Then all of a sudden it was 15. Now it's looking like maybe 20 or 22.
Well, what the deal was is that the pipeline, Enbridge did their diving inspection that they do, or remote operated vehicle inspection, and they found 4 spans that were longer than the 75-foot mandate. But they also found something like 15, that may not be the exact figure, where the pipeline appeared to be washing out and it was probably going to need more support soon. So they went into the state of Michigan and asked for a permit for not only the 4 spans that they needed to put in immediately, but also the other 15 or so that they thought they would need soon. The state was a little miffed because they'd been told in 2014, apparently, by Enbridge that this pipeline wasn't going to need any more support. So when Enbridge came back in 2016 and says we need 4 right now and we probably need another 15, the state did not give them permission for the 15. They did put in the 4 last fall. And now I've heard, I haven't confirmed this yet, that the number of 15 has now come up to 22 that Enbridge needs to put in. So clearly the bottom of the straits is unstable, and this pipeline is continually being challenged.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. We have to go to a short break right now, but when we come back, we'll have more to discuss on the Line 5 pipeline. It's no secret that the Line 5 pipeline is a cause for concern for many residents of the Great Lakes region. Over the past few years, oil spills caused by the company Enbridge have exacerbated those concerns. We spoke to retired chemical engineer Dr. Ed Tim, who spent the past 3 years dedicating his life to researching that issue from an engineering perspective. To get a visual representation of what exactly we were dealing with, we headed into Dr. Tim's garage. Welcome back. I'm still here with Dr. Tim, but now we are in his garage, where he has some real-life representations of the Line 5 pipeline. Dr. Tim, what is this?
Okay, Teresa, you know, when I started giving these talks about pipelines, I realized that it would be a little easier to communicate with people if I had something that was actually a model of the pipe. So this is an exact scale model of one part of the pipe. This is a scale model of the 30-inch pipe that makes up most of the line, the 640 miles that aren't under the straits. And it's 30-inch outside diameter, 5/16-inch wall pipe, typically operates up to 700 psi pressure.
Okay, what about this little one?
This guy is exact scale for the two pipes that are under the straits. Of course, they couldn't put, I believe, this big a pipe under the straits at the time, and so they chose to put two 20-inch thick-walled pipes under the straits. You can see this pipe is much thicker and heavier than the pipe that's buried. Now, this pipe is made out of a very common grade of steel, well, like coat hangers, so it's pretty flexible, and it was a very good choice for the job, but it's very old now, and we have some questions about that.
Okay, what about this?
All right, now this is something that was part of the original design. The original design for the pipeline under the straits to protect the steel pipe from corrosion called for the pipe to be coated with asphalt, wrapped with fiberglass, and then have a bunch of wood slats put on it. These wood slats were probably intended to keep the pipe, when it's laying on the ground, from grinding away the coating. Unfortunately, during the pipe laying process, there were some problems, and these wooden slats didn't make it across the straits. And when you look at the inspection videos of the pipeline, you can see that they're laying all over the floor of the straits. So that was one of the things that didn't work out in the beginning of this pipeline construction project.
This is the greater part of the pipeline is made up of this. What is the main enemy of this pipeline?
Pressure. This part of the pipe, because it's so thin-walled and is operated at pressures up to 700 psi, is trying always to blow up like a balloon. So it will be fine until enough corrosion takes place, enough rust, that the metal can no longer resist the force. Then you'll have a rupture of it eventually.
Enbridge conducts inspections to make sure that everything is going well with the pipeline that's underwater, which is this one. There's two of them. What do those inspections entail?
Well, there are all kinds of inspections that are done internally in the pipe by the means of instrumented pigs, they're called, that they push through the pipe and that measure things and take ultrasound to the pipe from inside. But they also do visual inspections from the outside to make sure that the pipe is being supported. Because the problem, since the very beginning, has been the very strong currents in the straits tend to wash the bottom out from under this, leaving it unsupported. And so over the years, since 2002, they've had to drill, now it's something like 130 supports under the pipe, and they're asking for permits now to put another 20 or so in.
Is that style of fixing it a quick fix, in your opinion?
That's an interesting question, because this pipeline is so unique. There's absolutely nothing like it, that it isn't where Enbridge started. They started out trying to put bags filled with cement under the pipe. But it has become accepted technology. It wasn't developed for the Straits. They learned how to do those kind of pipeline supports in other places like the Arabian Gulf or in Texas. But Enbridge has adopted the technology and they're applying it well in this case. But the problem is, it's like whack-a-mole. Every time they put in some supports, some more bottom washes away and they need more supports. And there may well be a problem if they try and put supports entirely under the pipeline because it wants to move around and may start tearing out the supports. Indeed, I have some evidence that that's happening. So, very complicated question. And because of an original engineering problem back in 1953, where they failed to understand how strong the currents were, they are now having to continually trying to fill in a hole that keeps being dug out.
Where do the currents come into play?
The currents are caused by storms. It's been very well researched by researchers both from U of M and Michigan Tech and the Great Lakes Environmental Work Institute in Ann Arbor. And essentially it's caused by the pressure gradients and winds when a big front comes through. When it's a beautiful day over on the Lake Huron side, but the weather is breaking down and there's a big cold front coming with high pressure and big winds. When that front sweeps across the lake, it pushes a lot of water. And that causes a huge current in the Straits. We also have a little tide in the Straits, just like the ocean. Not much, but when all that adds up, it can be a problem.
How does Enbridge, how does anyone monitor those tides and all of those currents to make sure that the pipelines are continuing to be safe and secure?
They don't at this point. There is one buoy that Enbridge has paid for that has current monitoring data. It's buoy 45175 that mariners use all the time. And unfortunately, that buoy isn't placed anywhere near the pipeline. So it doesn't give really good data on the pipeline. Now the reason why, well, I don't know, but I'm told that Coast Guard wouldn't give permission to put the buoy in the no anchor corridor that's established around the pipeline.
So how do we make sure that the pipeline can withstand these currents in such a unique area?
Well, that's the subject of debate right now. I can't give you an answer for that. I have some concerns, and it's one of the recommendations I've made to the Governor's Pipeline Safety Board is that we need to get good data. We need absolutely to have current monitoring devices at pipeline depth, several places in the Straits, and we need to watch that data very carefully. We need to build that database over a couple years, but I also believe until we fully understand what's going on, anytime that current monitoring equipment indicates there have been very severe currents, the pipeline should be shut down and inspected.
And do you think that that will happen?
That's my recommendation. What happens in Lansing or Washington is what happens in Lansing and Washington.
How much involvement has the state had with this issue?
Well, it has built up over the last 4 or 5 years. Before the current Governor's Pipeline Safety Advisory Board, we had a Governor's Pipeline Task Force that studied the thing for 2.5 years, and they recommended that it be studied some more. So they formed this new board that's studying it, and indeed, they have commissioned 2 studies by independent experts, and those are going to be released at the next PSAB meeting, which is going to be on June 13th, right here in Petoskey. So that'll be a very interesting meeting.
Yes, it will. Do you expect there to be anything different with, do you expect this meeting to bring forth any type of change, or I guess it's kind of political?
Well, at this point, what this meeting does is it gets out the draft versions of these reports. One of them is called the alternatives analysis, one of them is called the risk analysis, and gets them out for public comment. And then we have 30 days to read them, understand them, and make public comments. And then all this gets rolled around by the Pipeline Safety Advisory Board, and then they'll do whatever they choose to do. You know, my role in this is more or less like Dilbert, as I've explained. I try and explain stuff. I try and let management know what the issues are. It's up to management to make good political decisions, and by the way, that's all you guys.
This issue is very technical. It's hard for people to wrap their mind around it. We do know that there's some concern based on Enbridge's experience with other pipelines, like the one in the Kalamazoo River. How do you think that the average person should go about understanding this issue?
You know, one thing about this, and one thing that makes it interesting for me to try and explain to people, is it really isn't that complicated. Because what we're fundamentally dealing with here is rust in most cases. And everybody has experience with rust. This is just like a car, you know, when it's brand new and the paint job is good, everything is fine. Once the paint gets chipped, one day you come out and see a little rust spot. A little bit later, that rust spot's a hole. You may get it patched up, it comes back. And eventually, you've got to replace the car. And that's what we're really talking about here, is when it's appropriate to replace this pipeline or decommission it. And that's a subject of a lot of concern and obviously varying opinions, with a lot of the environmental people feeling like it shouldn't have been there more than 50 years, and Enbridge taking the position that it's going to be good virtually forever. So somewhere in between those is the truth, and we're trying to understand that.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. The Line 5 pipeline is a complicated issue that local, state, and federal agencies have invested time into understanding. We hope this segment has helped you understand the issue and those involved with it a little bit better, to make it a little bit clearer for those of you at home. The issue continues to be investigated with the next pipeline board meeting on June 12th at Petoskey Middle School. That's all we have for you today. I'm Teresa Lepowski, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Insights.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.
The furniture and set design for this episode of Insights is provided by Young Appliance Art Van Furniture on US 23 South, Alpena.